Some medical cases are so bizarre, so impossible, that they rewrite what doctors thought they knew about the human body. And these mysteries reveal how much we still don't understand. Let's start with encephalitis lethargica, also called sleeping sickness. Between 1915 and 1926, about 1 million people worldwide developed this disease. They'd become extremely drowsy, fall into sleep-like states for weeks or months, then wake up but be frozen in statue-like postures, unable to move voluntarily but fully conscious. 1/3 of patients died. 1/3 recovered. 1/3 remained in this frozen state for years. Then, as mysteriously as it appeared, the disease vanished. It never came back. Here's what stumped doctors. They never identified the cause. Theories included viral infection, autoimmune reaction, bacterial infection, but nothing was ever proven. Survivors who remained frozen were treated decades later with L-Dopa, a Parkinson's medication, and some temporarily woke up after being frozen for 40+ years. This was documented in the book and movie Awakenings. But the original disease? Still unsolved. Now let's talk about nodding disease, a neurological condition affecting thousands of children in East Africa. Kids develop seizures triggered specifically by eating food or experiencing cold temperatures. Their heads nod involuntarily, hence the name. The disease causes severe cognitive impairment, stunted growth, and often death. It appeared suddenly in the 1960s in South Sudan, then spread to Uganda and Tanzania. Here's the mystery. Nobody knows what causes it. Theories include vitamin deficiencies, parasitic infections, chemical exposure, even tainted food supplies. Despite extensive research, the cause remains unknown, and there's no effective treatment. Children continue developing this disease in specific regions, and medical science has no answers. If you're fascinated by medical mysteries that science can't explain, hit subscribe. We're diving into cases that baffle even the experts. Let's talk about Havana syndrome. Starting in 2016, U.S. diplomats and intelligence officers in Cuba reported hearing strange sounds, then developing severe symptoms: headaches, dizziness, cognitive problems, hearing loss. Brain scans showed actual changes in brain structure. The symptoms were real and debilitating. Here's what stumped everyone. What caused it? Theories included sonic weapons, microwave attacks, mass psychogenic illness, pesticide exposure, and even crickets. The US government investigated extensively. Some studies suggested directed microwave energy. Others found no evidence of attack. Years later, there's still no consensus on what happened, or whether it was intentional, environmental, or psychological. Now here's a mystery that terrified doctors. Kuru disease. In Papua New Guinea, people from the Fore tribe were dying from a progressive neurological disease. They'd develop tremors, lose coordination, become unable to walk, and die within a year. It was epidemic, affecting mostly women and children. The mystery deepened when researchers discovered the cause: ritualistic cannibalism. The Fore people consumed deceased relatives, including brains, as a funeral rite. The disease was transmitted through prions, infectious proteins that cause brain degeneration. But here's what's still mysterious. Prion diseases typically affect people in their 50s or 60s, but Kuru affected children. And some people had incubation periods of over 50 years. They were exposed as children and didn't develop symptoms until old age. How prions can remain dormant for decades and then suddenly activate is still not fully understood. Let's talk about spontaneous human combustion. There are documented cases of people found burned to death in circumstances where the fire seemed to start inside their body. The victim's torso and head are reduced to ash, but their limbs might be intact. The surroundings show minimal fire damage. No external ignition source is found. Here's why it stumps scientists. Human bodies don't just burst into flames. The wick effect theory suggests that clothing acts like a candle wick, and body fat fuels a slow burn, but this doesn't explain how fires start spontaneously. Skeptics argue there's always an external ignition source that wasn't identified, but some cases remain genuinely unexplained, with no clear cause for how the fire began. Now let's talk about foreign accent syndrome. People suffer a stroke or head injury and wake up speaking with a completely different accent. An American woman suddenly speaks with a British accent. A Japanese man develops a Korean accent. They haven't traveled to these places or studied these accents. Their brain injury just changed their speech patterns to sound like a foreign accent. Here's the mystery. These aren't fake. Brain scans show real damage to speech centers. The accent changes are consistent and permanent. But why does brain damage create specific accent patterns that happen to match real foreign accents? Some researchers think it's random changes in pitch, rhythm, and pronunciation that happen to sound like known accents. But it's eerie how precise these changes can be. If these medical mysteries are blowing your mind, make sure you're subscribed. We're exploring cases that challenge everything medicine thinks it knows. Let's talk about Morgellons disease. Patients report fibers emerging from their skin, crawling sensations, skin lesions that won't heal, and intense itching. They bring fibers to doctors in bags, insisting something is growing in their skin. Medical establishment dismissed it as delusional parasitosis, a psychiatric condition where people falsely believe they're infested with parasites. But here's where it gets complicated. Some studies found unusual fibers in lesions that didn't match environmental fibers. Some patients had no psychiatric history before symptoms started. The CDC investigated and found no infectious cause, but also couldn't definitively explain the fibers. Is it psychiatric? Is it environmental exposure? Is it an unidentified condition? It remains controversial and unresolved. Now here's one that rewrote neurology. Suzuki's syndrome. It's a rare autoimmune disease that attacks tiny blood vessels in the brain, retina, and inner ear. Patients go deaf, blind, and develop severe cognitive problems, all from an immune system attacking blood vessels in very specific locations. It took decades to identify as a distinct syndrome because symptoms were so varied that doctors thought patients had multiple different conditions. What's still mysterious? Why does it target those 3 specific areas? Why do some people recover completely while others have permanent damage? What triggers the immune system to attack? Even now that it's identified, treatment is hit or miss, and doctors don't fully understand the disease mechanism. Let's talk about Cotard's delusion, also called walking corpse syndrome. Patients genuinely believe they're dead. They'll insist their organs have stopped working, their body is decomposing, or they died but are somehow still moving around. They might stop eating because dead people don't need food. Brain scans show reduced activity in areas that process self-awareness and emotion. Here's the mystery. What causes a brain to produce the absolute conviction that you're dead while you're clearly alive? It's associated with depression and psychosis, but doesn't always respond to standard psychiatric treatments. Some patients have lived with this delusion for years, absolutely convinced they're deceased, despite all evidence to the contrary. Now here's a medical impossibility that happened. Fetus in fetu. A person develops normally, then doctors discover they have a partially formed fetus inside their body, their twin that was absorbed during development. These aren't just cells or tissue. Some have partially developed organs, bones, hair, or teeth. They're discovered during surgery for abdominal masses. What stumps doctors? At what point did one twin get absorbed into the other? Why does the absorbed twin sometimes continue growing throughout the person's life? How is it getting blood supply? Each case is unique, and the developmental biology is still not fully understood. Medical mysteries remind us that for all of medicine's advances, there are still conditions, diseases, and cases that science can't fully explain. These mysteries drive research, challenge assumptions, and reveal how much we still have to learn about the human body and the bizarre things that can go wrong.